properties that turn into these party houses or people that run rampant with this stuff and exploit these properties. I think the committee that is currently formed is actually a good thing. There's people for and against this, and together I think, you know, we can come up with some fair regulations. And really, the last STR meeting I went to, at the end, people were really listening to each other, and I think that's really what we need.
Thank you, Mr. Steve. Mr. Stanley, do you have a response to this?
Yes. So, as Kyle pointed out, we have currently created a short-term rental committee. This issue is concerning to the town. It has developed at an exponential rate throughout the town, and it needs to be addressed. It's not to say that it needs to be shut down at all. We see the benefits of it for the economy, for the town, for people, visitors that come to the town, and also for the locals that want to make a little extra income. The problems come when you have these LLCs that start purchasing multiple homes to do this as a business model within residential districts. It needs to be done with the safety, security, and welfare of the local community that it is involved in mind. We need to protect the rights of the local citizens that live here year-round and have to deal with certain issues that do arise from time to time with some of these operations. We look forward to finding some kind of fair and balanced approach to allowing these operations to continue, and it needs to follow through in the same kind of process that other businesses operating within the town have followed. They need to go to planning board, they need to check and see site plan review, they need to make sure they have the proper parking, inspections, and so on and so forth. But again, we want to ensure that we're doing it in a fair and balanced approach and allow the locals to make money while at the same time securing the safety and welfare of our citizenry.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. And Mr. Booth, same question?
I'd like to say I think the short-term housing committee is getting started on a good note, as Kyle said, and I think we need to let them continue. My comments would be as a first responder, I've gone to a few calls where safety issues have caused people to be injured, and I think that as they go through the process, they'll probably figure out something that along what I think we should do, and that we should have some sort of safety inspection at least. Is the water been tested? Are there railings on the stairs? All sorts of things like that. Is the sewer a legal hookup? I think that we need to have some sort of health and safety inspection, smoke detectors, CO detectors, and like that. And I think we also have to be aware of that we need to inform people with these buildings that even though they may be covered by Airbnb insurance, they may not be covered by their own insurance. And if something happens to the house, if they haven't talked to their insurance agent, they could be in trouble as a homeowner. So I think that, as has been said up here, that it's an industry that's not going to go away, but I think it's an industry that we need to get a little bit more control over and exercise a little bit of regulation to make it work safely for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Our next question has a couple parts to it, and this is going to be the first audience participation. The question is, do you believe Shandaken has enough affordable housing opportunities for its young, its old, and its working people? If not, what will you do about it? And the second part is, some of these properties do not support septic systems. What will you do about that? And this is for Mr. Stanley first.
Well, I'm going to say first off that I'm a little confused by the question, because is there a need for affordable housing within the town of Shandaken? Absolutely. Absolutely, we need affordable housing. But to say that some of these properties can't sustain septic systems means that somebody has pinpointed out what properties these locations would be for affordable housing. So could you clarify, maybe?
The question from our audience directly is, what can you do to assist homeowners who want to offer affordable housing but are unable to do so because their properties do not support the septic system required?
Okay, that much clearer. There's really nothing that we can do outside of what's required under the DEP regulations, watershed regulations for septic systems regarding the usage of a house. That's really goes to speak about protecting our environment, which again isn't so much the DEP regulation, but protecting ourselves. We rely on tourism here, and environment is a big part of our tourism, and to protect that environment is primal to our tourism economy here. What I'd like to see and what I propose, and I've talked about this just recently, is, and I think it goes to another question you've got coming up about EMS, I'd like to see us look at trying to find ways where we could provide affordable housing and possibly for renters that are getting into these affordable housing units, provide a discount that we provide to our volunteer firemen currently as a property owner. They may not be a property owner, but maybe we can promote it to going on to the renters where you can provide it to the property owner as well if the tenants are volunteer fire department people.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Mr. Booth, the same question?
Well, as Rob said, I think we do need affordable housing for people. That's one of the things that I think is hurting us and hurting the families that are looking to be here and not being able to find a place where they can stay. I have to say that we have to look at our zoning issues. Perhaps we can make areas where we won't have the competition with the short-term rental people and things along those lines. Maybe there's some other ways we can look at to help them. We have to investigate that. And as far as septic systems and sites like that, we're really regulated by what DEP says we have to do. And I think we have some pretty clever engineers out there. Maybe they can figure out something. But beyond those regulations, I don't know what we can do.
Mr. Steen, same question?
There absolutely isn't enough affordable housing, unfortunately. I think we have to somehow incentivize property owners to provide housing opportunities to local residents and to people that work in the community as well. As far as the septic systems go, as they have both said, unfortunately we're under the DEP's thumb with that, so we're going to have to find out a way to overcome that. Hopefully, affordable housing can be a thing in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. The next question, we're going to start with Mr. Booth. And two earlier questions both speak to the challenges with zoning and planning role codes. Do you think Shandaken needs to update its comprehensive plan and look at the big picture? Or do you believe that small tweaks in existing codes would be sufficient?
I think the comprehensive plan has to be a living, growing document and meeting the needs as the world has changed. Small tweaks, I think, probably would do most of what we're looking for there. I would like to see things in there that would be encouraging to families to come here. I know that in my own case, I was able to work from home for many years, and even though I worked in Westchester for 8 years, I was able to work out of my house in Shandaken. And maybe something in the comprehensive plan could be added to encourage that type of people to come here and stay here and be part of the community, as opposed to just coming up on the weekend and seeing the sights and going back to New York City or Westchester. I think we need to be able to encourage the families to be here, and by working with that code, that's one of the things I think we can do with it.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Mr. Steen, same question?
If I'm not mistaken, I think it was somewhere around 2005 that it was. So, I mean, that's more than 10 years, and that's a long stretch. We have things now that we didn't have in 2005. As technology advances, we need to stay on top of it and need to stay up to date with things. It definitely needs to be changed. I don't want to see it change dramatically, but changes have to be made.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Mr. Stanley?
Kyle, just to point out, it was 2005, and there's been a lot of changes. Like, I've had 2 kids, and one's about to graduate from Phoenicia. It's been about 10 years since we did the comp plan, and it does need to be looked at. It needs to be addressed. Again, as I said before, technology has changed, development patterns change, our ideas of development patterns change. We as a community need to address these issues. Now, the comp plan is a guidance document, ultimately. It is not a law. It is not a Bible, but it helps guide us through to what we want to see in our code and can help guide the code. I'm going to tell you that when I first ran, I think as councilman, we had no idea about the need or necessity for a telecommunications law because we didn't even have we barely had cell phones at the time. So laws need to be reviewed, they need to be adjusted. Again, there's things that have gone on, be it the STRs, be it cellular communications, broadband communications, that need to be addressed within the code. Also, again, who knows what's to come next, what's the next big business that's going to be, but I'd really like to see more, as Ken pointed out, some telecommuting and really promote families coming here to live.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. The next question is, what is the role of the town board, including the supervisor, in business and economic development? How will you fulfill that role? We're going to start with Mr. Steen.
Well, I think the role is to support existing business, along with finding and supporting new businesses as well. Keeping local businesses in social centers, this way people can get to them a lot easier, not having them spread out so much. And the cross support of local businesses helping each other out. I think that's a big thing, if one place doesn't have something, maybe another place does, and we don't have to have that be a bad thing. That could be a good thing. I think that's very important here.
Thank you, Mr. Steve. Mr. Stanley, same question.
Again, I believe, as Kyle stated, that we want to keep the development patterns where we are. We want to keep our economic centers strong. We want to promote those businesses that want to come into our community and help provide any opportunity we can where it's acceptable to the community. Again, knowing we have 12 hamlets and each hamlet is diverse and distinct to itself, and they feel that they know what they want in their community. It's listening to those communities and understanding what they want, where they want it. We do not want to see a lot of sprawl. We do not want to be, not to any chagrin, we don't want to be any Hurley where we see just businesses up and down Route 28. We want to keep it within our economic centers. We want to see Phoenicia and Pine Hill thrive. We want to see Shandaken and Big Indian thrive again. Again, I remember as a young kid enjoying shops and stores that were there, butcher shops, things that have closed over the years, and I'd love to see them rebuild and come back again. This is where the community understood those businesses to be historically, and I'd love to see them continue to thrive and build back up.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Mr. Booth?
I agree with both those guys. I'd just like to add that in doing this, we do need to keep in mind that we have to protect what is special about Shandaken. The communities and the people that are here and the families that are here, the mountains, the streams. As a town board member, I don't want to see anything coming along that's going to spoil that. And so I can disagree with them with keeping things open to everybody, but under control and not all over the place, like Rob said, sprawling around the town.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. I'm going to start with Mr. Stanley on this one. Do you believe tourism serves as an economic engine? And if yes, what might you do to increase tourism activity?
No, I don't believe tourism is an economic driver at all in this community. Of course, I'm joking, but yeah, it absolutely it is the #1 driver for our economy here in the town of Shandaken. Be it through the Bel Air Resort, be it through people coming to visit for the fall foliage, be it people coming here to go biking, hiking, fishing, whatever it may be, to enjoy the outdoors. That's really what we're about enjoying the community as a whole. People love to stroll the streets of Phoenicia just to walk up and down the street. We want to see more of that. I've done my part as best I can to try to help promote tourism. Again, I was a ski instructor at Bel Air for more than 30 years. I love skiing at Bel Air. I'll talk about the sport of skiing with anybody, anywhere, anytime. I have personally been up to Albany to discuss with the Governor's Office of Budget about getting and securing funding, which ultimately came through for the gondola that they now have. We still talk with Bel Air about expanding their opportunities for people to come up to Bel Air and enjoy that. Again, we want to see more of this. We work hard with the Scenic Byway to promote tourism, and we are currently, again, working with our friends up in Hunter and Lexington to try to expand that Scenic Byway network so that we can work in conjunction with them as a larger voice.
Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Mr. Booth, same question?
Pretty much the same answer. We've always been a tourist area. Well, once they cut down all the trees, we were a tourist area. Back in the early 1900s, look at all the resorts that were here. Almost every corner seemed to have had some sort of spa or resort or something to attract people here. The trains used to come up and down the valley, and there'd be people coming all over the place to visit and stay. And that goes on till today, whether they're coming up to ski or whether they're coming to hike or go tubing or pedal themselves on the railroad. And it's part of our life here, and that's one of our main economic engines, and we need to support that.
And how would you support that, Mr. Booth?
I think through promoting it through the town board, making sure that we make sure people are aware of what's going on up here. We have to give everybody the opportunity to hear about what's going on here. We have to make it special, and we just have to promote it.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. And Mr. Steen, same question?
It's absolutely a tourist town. It always has been, well, ever since I can remember, and that's not too far back, but yeah, I mean, between the restaurants and the hotels and all the shops and everything, you know, we rely on tourism to stay afloat. But we also, as well as that, we also want people to stay here as well as visit. I know quite a number of people who were tourists at one point in time, and they've decided to stay here. And that's kind of like what we're looking for, you know, that the families to come up and stay here to sustain the town. I believe social media as well as word of mouth is probably the best, you know, form of communication to get these people to get here. And once they're here, I think the beauty and the majestic nuances of this place are just, you know, they're going to capture them, and we just have to get them here to make sure that they can find, you know, all of these things.
Thank you, Mr. Steen. Our next question is a bit of a follow-up to that one. What other types of industry would you propose for Shandaken? We're going to start with Mr. Booth.
I'll go back to my earlier statement where I talked about how I was able to work from home for 8 years of my 31 years working in Westchester. Any sort of home industry can do that. Yeah, any sort of author, you name it, where you don't have to be in office, or you can telecommute via video conferencing, all these things like that I was able to do, and it allowed me to be home for my kids when they got off the bus from school, and